So, in this one gospel passage, we encounter violence, unquenchable fire, the suggestion of self-mutilation and self-harm. There's discussion about the threat of harming children, hellfire, demon possession, and exorcism. My first thought when I read this gospel was, why don't maybe this week we use a different book to help us? Maybe one of Aesop's fables, like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. There's a good one. Let's do that. I just want something to help me love others and learn to love myself, to be a kinder, better person. And instead, we encounter this gospel, which is incredibly serious, incredibly dark, not particularly inviting, somewhat threatening, and definitely an uncomfortable passage. And overall, it does frustrate me sometimes that even though I know Jesus had a sense of humor, he had to have had a sense of humor to say some of the outrageous things that he said. The gospel overall is deeply serious. It's a really serious book from more or less beginning to end, with the possible exception of Jonah, which is still deeply serious. Because the matters Scriptures deals with are matters of life and death. The Bible talks about peace and war, health and sickness, the vulnerable and the powerful, the rich and the poor. And I think there's a lot of us that come here, maybe on Sunday, really in our minds looking for helpful hints for happy living. In our bones, we want to be saved. We want to be saved from death, saved from violence, saved from sickness and suffering and pain, saved from poverty and fears about money, saved from being powerless and vulnerable. I think that's why we're actually here. And maybe that's something that we don't really want to think about too much. So I think there's some of us that might be craving on the surface this kind of the parable, like the tortoise and the hare. But in our bones, we have a deep, deep need. And so I think what the church is actually about, we might sometimes get backwards. I think sometimes we might think that we want to come to church because it's a safe shelter from the storm. But I think what actually needs to happen, and it's throughout the gospel, is we're actually called to leave the shelter of our homes, leave the shelter of our regular patterns, the shelter of our televisions, and come here where we can be deeply honest about how deeply we want to be saved, and come out from the shelter and look together at the coming storm clouds that are coming in our lives. We come in this place together, out from the shelter, to confess together the things that we have done and left undone, eat and drink together a very simple meal, perhaps the simplest meal we have in our lives, and approach honestly the things that we need to say to God, that we need to say to one another, and that we need to say to ourselves. We're a community that is called to come together and tell the truth to God. Tell the truth to ourselves and prepare ourselves to tell the truth to the world, a world that might want to shelter itself from the way things actually are and how things are actually going. The church isn't a shelter from the storm. It's kind of where we go to together confront the storm and look it square in the eye and see where God is calling us to go. And so we're given passages that help us do that, to help us approach death and life and peace and war. And so we have passages like this. Everyone is salted with fire. Each of us has within us an unquenchable passion. We all have passion. We all have deep feelings. And sometimes this fire can be good if we're at peace with one another. And sometimes this fire can take over to the point where the salt loses its saltiness. The passion becomes anger and rage, and it takes us over, and then we're of no help to anyone and on a very dark road. Jesus tells this parable about if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. There is not a single, as far as I know, Christian fundamentalist group that's cutting off their hands and feet. It's a parable, right? It's a parable that's causing us to think very, very deeply about those things, those patterns, those things we do in our lives that are very slowly causing us to destroy ourselves. It's in our DNA, right? Each of us has this strange temptation to undo the very best things in our lives and undo ourselves. And Jesus is saying, look, you need to cut those things out. No matter how attached you are, it might feel like whatever this is a part of you, like your own hand. You need to cut it out because it's leading you on a path, a very dark path, a much darker path than you might be on now. This gospel talks about children, probably the most violent thing that Jesus says in all four gospels. You'd be better to put a great millstone around your neck and throw it into the sea. I mean, this is incredibly serious stuff. When we think about the history of our world and the history of our church, woe betide anybody that not only harms a child, but prevents a child on a journey to Jesus from going into a dark place. It's unthinkable for me. For example, someone in the name of Jesus harming a young person. It's on the front cover of the Anglican journal. There's another clergy person, right? I can't think of anything more horrific. Not only, even if they get over these things, all the symbols of the church that are meant to bring hope and joy and love, those symbols will forever be destroyed for those people that were harmed by this Christian. And so Jesus says you'd be better off to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the sea. Woe betide anybody who harms a young person seeking Christ. This is serious, serious stuff. And finally, I feel like this kind of stuff is, to be honest, I feel like it's written for clergy. Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name. We tried to stop them because he was not following us. There are so many clergy who are doing it wrong. They're at the world. In my opinion. And Jesus says, do not stop him, for no one who does a deed of power in my name will be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. Jesus is saying, look, I'm doing something with that person. When they pray in my name, I am doing something in their heart, in their minds. And he's almost saying it's none of your business. It's between me and them. If they keep praying in my name day after day after day, I'm doing something. You focus on you, and I'll work with them. It's none of your business what my relationship is with that person who prays in my name. Serious stuff. Amen.